It was Christmas morning when my son closed the front door in my face and said coldly, "You don't belong to this family anymore. Leave." I caught a glimpse of his wife smirking behind him, but I didn't shout. I just gave a slight nod, stepped into my car, and made one phone call. Within 5 minutes, every guest at their holiday dinner rose from their chairs and walked out, leaving my son and his wife alone in their grand home. Their betrayal had gone too far, and I couldn't let it pass without showing them what real consequences looked like. Before I go on, I'd appreciate it if you subscribed to this channel and dropped a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. Now back to what happened. Dad, why can't you be like Charles? He's a real man with real money. Those words hit me with a force I hadn't expected. I stood frozen near the living room, staring at my son Mason, who was casually adjusting his sparkling Rolex. It probably cost more than my monthly pension. His sharp designer coat hugged his shoulders perfectly, tailored to reflect his new world. Everything about him broadcast a wealth I never had. "What did you just say?" I asked, my voice too soft to sound stern, more like a whisper. Mason sighed and rolled his eyes, the same expression he used as a teenager whenever I reminded him to clean his room. Only now it was backed by grown-up disdain. "You heard me. Charles Grant built an empire. Just look at this place." He waved a hand at my modest living room furniture. The same sofa I used to help him with homework on, its arms slightly faded but always clean. Anger stirred in my blood. "You see those hands?" I pointed at my rough knuckles. "They paid for your degree, every last tuition bill. That school didn't help me. I broke my back to give you a future until I married Leela." He tugged at his silk tie like it was part of a show. "Charles gave me opportunities, real ones. He got me in rooms you could never dream of. And you've been holding me back with your blue-collar mindset." My hand clutched the doorway, trembling. 4 decades of working 2 jobs, missing family meals, and sleeping through backaches. It had all come down to this. I gave up my dreams so he could chase his. And this was the reward. All you've ever given me is a house that reeks of a contractor's life. It's embarrassing. His laugh cut through the room like glass. When Leela's friends ask about my background, I lie. What am I supposed to say? That my dad owns nothing but old drills and wrenches? Charles owns half the commercial real estate in this city. And you own rust. That was it. Something deep inside finally broke. Decades of holding it together just shattered. "Out," I said, pointing firmly to the door. "Don't try the martyr act," Mason scoffed. "We both know I've outgrown this dump. I've outgrown you." He stepped toward the exit with deliberate arrogance, his shoes echoing loudly. "Maybe it's time you faced the truth. Some people are born for bigger things." The door slammed behind him so hard the family photos on the mantel rattled. I stood in silence, stunned. That same boy I taught to ride a bike, who once held my hand on the first day of school, he had just dismissed my life's work like it was a stain on his new suit. Outside, I heard metal dragging and footsteps on gravel, something being scraped across the concrete. But I was too drained to check. I collapsed into my favorite armchair, the one with a tiny rip from Mason's childhood scissor experiment. I went through my evening routine in a haze, hung up my work shirt, brushed my teeth, all like a man half alive. In the mirror, I saw a 70-year-old man staring back at me, older than he looked yesterday. Mason's voice echoed in my head, a real man with real money. The irony, that same boy once showed off a toolbox I gave him, grinning ear to ear. "My dad builds everything," he boasted. When did that pride become shame? I remembered coming home from a 3 a.m. shift on the Benson job just in time to catch Mason's graduation. Still in dirty work clothes, covered in dust, but I was there. He hugged me tight that day and whispered, "Thanks for never missing anything, Dad." How quickly that gratitude faded. Paying for college meant endless overtime, sacrificed weekends, and no vacations. Every spare dime went into his education fund. I once told him, "I want you to have chances I never did." And back then, he looked like he understood. Until the day he came back from dinner at Charles Grant's mansion. He walked through the front door, eyes wide, and said, "Dad, Charles's house is insane, like something from a movie. They've got a wine cellar, marble floors, art that could buy this entire block." His voice carried awe, but behind it was envy. That night marked a shift. The comparisons started small at first. Charles says investing beats saving, then bigger. I should have gone into finance, not engineering. And then came the looks, those critical eyes, every time he visited home, like everything was suddenly beneath him. Our phone calls shortened. Dinners were cancelled. "Sorry, Dad, Leela's folks are hosting something." His tone changed too, more excited when talking about Charles than me. Last Christmas, he showed up late, with gifts that felt more like formalities. "Charles is teaching me about how charitable donations double as tax write-offs," he said, while handing me a luxury watch I'd saved up for all year. Even my gifts became bullet points in his new philosophy. I watched him morph from a boy proud of his roots to a man embarrassed by them. Each visit came with another transformation. Designer clothes, talk of hedge funds, name-dropping luxury clubs. What happened yesterday wasn't sudden. It was years in the making. Charles didn't just get a son-in-law, he took my son. Maybe not on purpose. Maybe just by being the kind of man society rewards while people like me get dismissed. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, trying to remember the last time Mason asked how I was doing, or if I was okay. I couldn't recall. Maybe it had been months, maybe longer. This house, the one he now mocked, was his whole childhood. Every thunderstorm, every skinned knee, every broken toy. It all happened here, and now he couldn't wait to tear it down. I finally fell asleep near midnight, exhausted not from labor, but from heartbreak. Even in my dreams, his words haunted me. Some people are meant for greater things, and clearly I wasn't one of them. Sunlight broke through the window blinds, unfiltered and sharp. I woke up with aching joints, every limb reminding me of my age. The clock on my nightstand read 8:15 a.m. Later than I usually sleep, but yesterday had left me drained in ways that no physical work ever could. Dragging myself to the bathroom, I avoided the mirror entirely. The last thing I wanted was to see what regret looked like. I slipped into my usual flannel shirt and work jeans, mechanically going through the motions of getting dressed, but my mind wasn't in it. Instead, it kept circling Mason's words, worker mentality. The phrase clung to me like damp clothes. Snow had fallen overnight, blanketing our neighborhood in a clean layer of white that masked the wear and tear beneath. It made even my weather-beaten house look almost pristine. Normally, I found comfort in my morning ritual, brewing coffee, stepping outside for the paper. But today felt strange. The world hadn't changed, but something inside me had. I stepped onto the porch, the cold biting at my skin. My breath came out in thick clouds. That's when I noticed something odd. The mailbox, one I'd installed myself 15 years back, was bent. The door swung open loosely, the whole box hanging crooked on its post. I walked toward it slowly, my boots crunching the snow beneath me. The damage wasn't an accident. Someone had taken a blunt object to it, a bat or maybe a crowbar. The edges were scraped, the structure warped. This wasn't some teenage prank. It was deliberate, methodical. My mind flashed to the noise I'd heard last night. Metal scraping, gravel crunching. It all lined up now. I crouched down, knees protesting with age. In the snow surrounding the mailbox, I saw boot prints, size 10 or 11. Not a kid, an adult. I stood up slowly, unsettled. After 40 years in this quiet neighborhood, nothing like this had ever happened. The timing, too perfect to ignore. Back inside, I filled my favorite mug with coffee and tried to read the newspaper. But the words didn't make sense. Headlines blurred. Stats and stories melted together. My thoughts kept circling the dented mailbox and Mason's voice ringing in my ears. I considered calling the police but dropped the idea. What was I going to say? My son humiliated me, and then someone destroyed my mailbox. They'd think I was paranoid, just an old man seeing patterns where there weren't any. My coffee sat untouched as I flipped to the crossword. 7 across. Betrayal within one's own family. I stared at it for a long moment. No punchline came, no wry chuckle, just silence. Outside, life went on as usual. Neighbors brushed snow off their cars. Garage doors opened. Kids laughed as they waited for the school bus. Then the phone rang. 3 rings passed before I answered, not expecting anyone I wanted to hear from. Hello. Dad, it's me, Mason. His voice was too cheerful, too sweet, like syrup poured over broken glass. Mason, I kept my tone flat. Listen, about yesterday, I've been up all night thinking. I messed up. Big time. I said things I didn't mean. I'm really sorry. The apology came too smooth, too polished. The kind of thing rehearsed in a mirror. You sounded pretty confident about how you felt yesterday. No, that's just it, he replied quickly. I was under stress. Work, been a lot. And you know how Leela's family gets, always pressuring me to prove myself. He gave a little laugh, but he didn't reach his voice. That was when I felt it, a chill deeper than the morning air. The Mason from yesterday had been cold but honest. This one was pretending, and that made him dangerous. Anyway, he continued, Leela and I would love it if you came over for Christmas dinner. Nothing fancy. Just her parents, a few relatives, some people from Charles's firm. You know, a small get-together. A dinner, I asked, each word falling heavy. Yeah, starts at 6. Leela's making her roast. You should come. It'll mean a lot. I should have said no. Every instinct in me was throwing up red flags, but some broken part of me, the part that still wanted to believe there was love behind the lies, overrode everything else. All right, I said softly. I guess I could come. Great, he said, way too excited. Oh, and Dad, maybe wear that nice suit you wore to Mom's funeral. You know, first impressions count. There was silence for a second. Then I heard something faint, voices in the background. I was about to hang up when I realized the line was still open. He actually believed it. Mason's voice came through, sharp, mocking. You're awful, Leela giggled in reply, but it was more gleeful than judgmental. But this will be perfect. Charles is going to love it. His self-made empire against your humble little father. What a contrast. And the legacy, she added. My dad needs to see how far you've risen above your roots. This dinner guarantees our future. Charles will see how devoted we are to him. My hand trembled, nearly dropping the receiver. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't a reconciliation dinner. It was a trap, a well-choreographed humiliation. They weren't inviting me to celebrate the holiday. They were inviting me to play the role of the poor, outdated builder on display for their wealthy guests, to remind Charles Grant what kind of blood Mason had left behind. I placed the phone back in its cradle, chest tight. They hadn't just written me off. They'd written a script for my public shaming. The room seemed to close in. The walls, the furniture, even the light, all felt smaller, colder. I sat down in my chair, heart pounding. My ears still rang with their laughter, their plan. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The realization hit me like a collapsing roof. This wasn't about hurt feelings anymore. This was about calculated cruelty. But something else stirred inside me. Not the helplessness from yesterday. Something firmer. If they thought I'd just walk into that trap like some clueless old man, they were wrong. I hadn't built an entire life from nothing by being naive. If they wanted a show, fine. But it wouldn't go how they planned. My mind was already moving, thinking, designing, preparing. I could feel the tension rising, not from fear, but from strategy. They wanted to play games with the man who taught Mason everything about building things from the ground up. Then they were about to find out. This old man, still knew how to lay foundations and how to tear them down. I remained seated for several minutes, frozen, my fists clenched and unclenched as that final phrase from Leela echoed in my ears. This dinner guarantees our future. They weren't just preparing for some high society meal. They were constructing a social play, and I was meant to be the pathetic prop that highlighted their triumph. But they made one crucial mistake. They assumed I wouldn't find out. I stood, legs unsteady beneath me, but my focus clear. Years of experience in construction had trained my mind to think in sequences: preparation, foundation, execution. If they were treating this dinner like a performance, they had no idea I was about to rewrite the script. My eyes landed on a small photo on the fridge. Mason and I at his high school graduation. My arm around his shoulders, both of us smiling. That photo had cost me 3 years of 18-hour shifts, skipping holidays and weekends just to pay for that private school. That diploma was paid for in sweat and time, and now it was being weaponized. As I stared, something shifted in my chest, not sadness this time, but resolve. My own father had once told me after I'd gotten beaten up by the neighborhood kids, "You can lie there and take it, or you can stand up and show them who raised you." That same fire now roared in my stomach. I glanced out the front window again at the crooked mailbox. It all made sense now. The vandalism, the hollow apology, the trap. This was psychological warfare. They wanted to disorient me before the big reveal, but I had no intention of playing the fool. I walked to my desk and pulled open the drawer where I kept important contacts. Somewhere in there was a business card, heavy stock, embossed lettering from Charles Grant himself. He'd handed it to me at Mason's birthday party last year. "Give me a call sometime," he'd said, his tone genuine. "We're family now. Would be nice to get to know each other." At the time, I didn't think much of it, just polite talk. But now, that card was leverage. The moment I found it wedged between an old warranty slip and my late wife's insurance policy, I felt my pulse quicken. The card felt different now. Not a memento, an opportunity. Charles Grant wasn't just a man of wealth. From the few times we'd spoken, I recognized something deeper. He valued integrity. He didn't build his empire by tolerating manipulation. What if he knew? What if Charles found out in advance how his daughter and son-in-law were plotting to use me as a pawn? Would he still tolerate them? Would he still see Mason as a worthy heir? I held the card tight, already imagining the conversation. But this couldn't be emotional. It had to be factual, precise, tactical. No rambling, no bitterness. Just truth, cleanly presented. Because I wasn't just defending my dignity. I was ensuring that two manipulative children didn't succeed in weaponizing legacy. I rehearsed in my head. "Charles, this is Howard Lane, Mason's father. I know this is awkward, but I need to talk to you about the dinner tomorrow." "I do, Steph." "Charles, it's Howard. Something's come up, and I believe you should hear it from me before tonight's gathering." "Better." I would explain that I overheard a conversation, that the dinner was being orchestrated not for reconciliation, but for humiliation, that they wanted to parade me in front of his business partners like some sad exhibit to show how far Mason had risen above his roots. And more importantly, I'd tell him how I knew about the overheard call, the mailbox, the orchestrated cruelty. I would do what builders do best, reveal the structural flaws beneath a shiny surface. But I had one concern. What if Leela was with him when I called? Father-daughter breakfasts weren't uncommon in family-run businesses. I needed to be ready to offer to call back, or ask if we could speak privately. Still, I sensed this was the moment. Delay would only allow doubt to creep in. I sat down at the dining table with the business card and picked up the phone. The digits came back easily. My muscle memory, trained from years of dialing for materials, permits, and contracts. The line rang. Once, twice. Then Charles Grant speaking. His tone was crisp, alert. No assistance, no filtering. Charles, this is Howard Lane, I began, calm but clear. Mason's father. I know this may seem out of nowhere, but I think there's something you need to know before tomorrow night. There was a pause. Go on, he said. And so I told him, every word, every moment, from the fake apology to the open line, to the cruel laughter and what they were really planning. I explained how they wanted to use me as a prop to impress him, to make him believe Mason had outgrown his old man. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, the silence stretched on. For a moment, I worried I'd gone too far. But then Charles spoke. Thank you for telling me, Howard. That explains a lot. I appreciate your honesty. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. I don't want revenge, I said. I just think it's only fair that you walk into that dinner knowing the full picture. Another pause. Actually, he said, voice cooler now, how would you feel about making a small adjustment to tomorrow's plan? And just like that, everything began to shift. Later that evening, I found myself driving through the upscale Hillstone neighborhood where Mason lived. The streets sparkled with Christmas lights and lined with parked luxury cars, BMWs, Teslas, the occasional Rolls-Royce. His house was a mini mansion, glowing with soft exterior lighting. Charles's sleek black Bentley sat at the front, surrounded by other vehicles worth more than my old house. I parked my modest Toyota at the curb beside a pearl-white Porsche. The contrast wasn't lost on me. Inside, behind those wide front windows, shadows moved. Guests talking, drinks clinking, laughter floating through the glass. No doubt waiting for the show to begin. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I was wearing the same suit I had worn to my wife's funeral, a dark navy number, simple and slightly worn, but still presentable. They had asked for contrast. Well, they were going to get it. My shoes crunched softly on the stone path leading to the front steps, and before I could ring the doorbell, the door opened. Mason stood there, backlit by golden light, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. His expression, satisfaction, that twisted smirk of someone who thought he'd already won. "Well, well," he said loudly, his voice carrying into the house. "Look who showed up." Leela appeared behind him, perfectly timed. Her sleek black dress, her practiced expression, it was all a part of the scene. "He actually came," she whispered, barely containing her glee. Mason stepped forward, blocking the entrance. "Let us be clear, Dad," he said, voice rising so guests inside could hear. "You're not family anymore. Our only real family is Leela's side. Now get lost." His words echoed in the air, slicing through the night. Inside, I saw conversations pause, heads turn. Leela laughed behind him, high-pitched and theatrical. "Did you see his face? Oh, this is better than I imagined." But they didn't see what I saw, the glances from inside, the narrowed eyes, the guests who knew what was coming. "I see," I said, my voice even. "Well, Mason, I hope you get everything you deserve tonight." He blinked. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I turned and walked away slowly, deliberately, back toward my car, back straight, not a tremble in my step. Behind me, I heard Mason's laugh falter. The crowd wasn't laughing with him. And they never would again. Once inside my car, I stayed parked a while. Through the windshield, I watched Mason and Leela retreat back inside, looking puzzled, almost unnerved. This wasn't the performance they'd rehearsed. There had been no pleading, no embarrassment, no spectacle of shame. I'd given them none of the reactions they expected, and that more than anything rattled them. I picked up my phone and dialed Charles. He answered on the second ring. "Howard." "As discussed," I said quietly, watching the golden-lit house as silhouettes moved beyond the curtains. "I understand completely," Charles replied. His tone was firm, focused, more business than sentiment now. "Thank you for keeping me informed." And that was it. No dramatics, no over-explanations, just two men, one retired, one powerful, who understood that some betrayals required swift and public consequences. Through the window, I could see Charles stand from his place at the table and raise a glass. The room quieted as guests turned toward him, waiting for what they assumed would be a toast about prosperity or the spirit of Christmas. "Friends," Charles began, voice rich with authority. "Tonight, I want to talk about family. Not the kind defined by wealth or bloodlines, but the kind defined by character, honesty, and loyalty." Mason and Leela beamed. This was it, their vindication. "I've recently learned," Charles continued, "that not all people who smile in your face deserve your trust. Some manipulate those closest to them. Some even try to use others' dignity as a stepping stone for their ambition." A silence fell over the table, subtle shifts of posture, forks frozen mid-air. "I've discovered the difference," he said calmly, "between those who build legacies on honor and those who build castles on deceit." Leela's expression changed first, confusion blooming into unease. Then Mason's smile faltered. "Tonight," Charles said, setting his glass down with care, "I will not be dining in this house, nor will I continue supporting those who believe cruelty is a mark of success." And just like that, he stood and moved toward the front door. Chairs scraped, eyes widened. The air inside the house turned thick. "Charles, wait!" Mason's voice cracked as he hurried to follow. "Dad, you don't understand," Leela pleaded, clutching at his arm. Charles didn't respond. He grabbed his coat and exited, his footsteps echoing in the marble foyer. Others began to move too. One guest excused herself, then another, then two more. Whispers filled the space as people collected coats and purses. It was no longer a dinner party, it was a retreat. Mason looked like a man watching a building collapse in slow motion. "You're making a mistake," he called out. "We can explain." But no one asked for an explanation. Charles crossed the snowy driveway and approached my Toyota with calm purpose. Three other guests followed close behind, silent, professional, unfazed by the cold. "Howard," Charles said, pausing beside my car, "I believe we'd rather spend Christmas with someone who understands what family really means." "Of course," I said, unlocking the doors. "Follow me, it's not far." And so we left, my humble Toyota leading a trail of luxury vehicles through the quiet neighborhoods of Denver. In the rearview mirror, the glow of Mason's house faded behind us. Charles sat beside me, looking out the window in thought. "May I ask something?" "Sure." "How did you know to prepare? I mean, not just the call, the dinner, all of it." I paused, thinking. Once I overheard that conversation, I called you immediately. But truth is, I've seen Mason changing for months. Another guest leaned forward from the back seat. "You really prepared a full meal tonight?" "Yes," I nodded. Something told me I should be ready, just in case. Charles smiled faintly. Most people would have walked into that house hoping for the best, or they wouldn't have shown up at all. You did neither. 40 years in construction teaches you one thing, I said. Always plan for the worst. Always have a backup plan, especially when people you once trusted stop acting like themselves. He nodded slowly. That's not just a builder's wisdom, that's leadership. We turned a corner, and rolled into my neighborhood. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. Modest single-story homes with aging paint, simple fences, quiet porches, but every house glowed with Christmas lights, nothing fancy but full of heart. "This," Charles murmured, peering out the window, "this is what I was trying to say during my toast. Real wealth isn't money, it's dignity, it's legacy you can be proud of." The other cars parked quietly along the street. One by one, these men and women, leaders in their own right, stepped out, not with awkwardness but with quiet respect. They didn't see a poor man's house. They saw a truth-teller's home. "Come in," I said, unlocking the front door. Warm light spilled from my living room as I led them in. The Christmas tree I had decorated alone stood proud in the corner. The dining table, already set for 8, waited in the next room. I had used my wife's best china, the same dishes we'd used every holiday before she passed. Charles was the first to step through the doorway. "You really made all this?" "I started around noon," I said, taking his coat. "It seemed like the right thing to do." The smell of roast turkey, herbed stuffing, and baked apple pie filled the house. Not catered aromas, real cooking, real love. The guests moved through the home slowly, admiring photos, handmade ornaments, the simple tree. I saw no judgment in their eyes, only admiration. "This," one guest said, settling into an armchair, "this actually feels like Christmas." I began bringing out dishes. The turkey, mashed potatoes, fresh green beans from my summer garden. No hired servers, no catered trays, just honest food served with honest hands. And then something unexpected happened. Charles stood up and began pouring water around the table. He didn't ask, he just did it. "When's the last time you poured your own drink?" one of his colleagues joked. "Tonight," Charles said, smiling, "because tonight we're just people, not titles." We shared the meal in peace. Conversation flowed. They told stories of their first jobs, their parents, their failures. I listened more than I spoke. It was the first time in years I felt part of something again. When dinner wound down, Charles raised his glass. "To Howard," he said, voice full, "for not only telling the truth, but for reminding us all what family looks like." A guest added, "Family isn't who shares your blood, it's who shows up when it matters." I stood slowly, heart pounding. The lights from the tree flickered across their faces. For a moment, the grief of yesterday was gone. We were about to toast when headlights appeared through the window. 2 new cars, doors slammed. A moment later, the front door burst open. Mason stormed in first, face red, breath heavy. Leela followed, makeup streaked, dress askew. "How dare you?" Mason growled. "You hijacked our guests." Around the table, the warmth evaporated. Wine glasses stilled, eyes turned. Charles straightened in his seat. "I didn't steal anyone," I said calmly, still holding my glass. "I offered them a seat at a table where they wouldn't be used." "You manipulated them," Leela snapped, pointing at me. "You spun your sad little story and made them pity you." One of Charles's partners cleared his throat. "Actually, we left because of Charles's speech. It made things very clear." Mason looked between them, eyes wild. "He's lying. He's bitter that I've surpassed him. He ruined our dinner because he's jealous." "Jealous?" Charles stood. His voice cut through the room. "Is that what you call it? Using your father as entertainment, ridiculing him for the amusement of strangers?" Leela dropped to her knees beside her father's chair. "Dad, please. You don't understand. We did it for you." "For me," he repeated, incredulous. "You thought humiliating an elderly man would win my approval." "It wasn't like that," Mason mumbled. but no one listened. The silence grew again, heavier this time. Mason looked to me. "You destroyed everything," he hissed. "You cost us everything." "No," I said quietly. "You did that yourselves. I just made sure someone saw it before it was too late." Leela grabbed Mason's arm. "Let's go. We don't need them." But as they turned, even they seemed to realize they now had nothing else to turn to. As the front door slammed shut behind them, the tension lifted like dust after a storm. The room fell into a stillness that didn't feel awkward. It felt right. It was the silence of justice being done. Charles remained standing, his eyes still locked on the door. He looked older in that moment, as if the weight of everything he had just witnessed had finally settled onto his shoulders. "Howard," he said, his voice softer now, "I owe you an apology, not just for their behavior, but for not seeing it sooner." "There's no need," I replied, settling back into my chair. "We all want to see the best in our children, even when it's not there." One of the guests raised their G. Lass once more, voice steady, "To true family values, not the ones people talk about in speeches, but the kind that show up when it matters." "And to second chances," added another. "Sometimes the family you need isn't the one you're born into, it's the one you find." I slowly lifted my glass, looking around the table. Faces that just hours ago were strangers now glowed with something more powerful than shared food, shared clarity. "To Christmas Eve," I said softly, "and to remembering that character, not wealth, is what makes life rich." Just then, snow began to fall outside the window. Gentle flakes drifted under the streetlights, covering the tire tracks, the broken pride, and the old wounds alike. I glanced around my modest dining room, decorated with my wife's old lace curtains, mismatched chairs, a decades-old ornament dangling crooked on the tree. But it had never looked more beautiful. Charles stood once more. "There's something else I need to say," he announced, his voice regaining its formal clarity. "As of this evening, Mason is no longer affiliated with Grant Enterprises in any capacity. No access, no roles, no inheritance of leadership." Everyone fell silent. He continued, turning toward the hallway, as if still addressing the ghosts of his daughter and son-in-law. "Furthermore, my estate will be amended. Leela's share will now match the amount Mason brought into the marriage." A gasp rippled through the room. "The rest," Charles said, "will be donated to charities that reflect the values my company was built on: honesty, resilience, and human dignity." "You can't do that," Leela had cried minutes earlier. But she could. And now she'd have to live with the reality that her inheritance was built on sand. "They had every chance," Charles said quietly, more to himself now, "and they chose the mask over the mirror." I said nothing. Some moments don't need words, they just need presence. And after years of showing up for Mason, even when he hadn't deserved it, this time, I showed up for myself. Across the room, Charles's partners nodded in approval. These were people who had built their careers through discipline and principles. They understood the depth of what they had just witnessed, not just a dinner party gone wrong, but a character test played out in full. One final time, Mason's voice had cut through the room, desperate, accusing. "It's his fault. He turned you against us." But Charles had replied with the only truth that mattered. "Howard told me what happened. That's something neither of you were capable of doing." And now, with the fire dying low and the plates nearly cleared, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. My son hadn't just tried to betray me, he'd tried to use my love as a weakness. But what he failed to understand is that real love isn't blind, it's brave. And sometimes it says, no more. No more manipulation. No more being ashamed of the life I built with my own two hands. No more hiding the truth. Outside, the snow continued to fall in thick, soft blankets, erasing every footprint left on my driveway. By morning, the path would look untouched, but everyone who sat at that table tonight would remember exactly what happened here. Not just a reckoning, a reset, a reminder that decency still matters, that a man with calloused hands can still command the room, that money is not the measure of a person, character is. After the guests left, shaking my hand one by one, I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching their taillights disappear into the night. Then I walked back inside and sat at the now empty table, still warm from the conversation, the connection. The final guest to leave was Charles. He paused at the door, looked around one last time, and then reached for my hand. "You reminded me of who I was before the wealth, before the boardrooms. Thank you." I nodded. He nodded back. And then he stepped into the night, the snow swallowing his footsteps behind him. I closed the door and turned off the lights. Only the Christmas tree remained glowing, its lights reflecting off the window like quiet stars. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel small in this house. I didn't feel outdated. I didn't feel discarded. I felt whole. If you found meaning in this story, we'd love if you gave it a like, subscribed, and told us in the comments what part hit you the hardest. And if you're ready for the next story, click the box on the left. Thanks for listening, and Merry Christmas.